good afternoon. Today is June 26, 2018, and we are here for a second interview with Dana Condit. I'm the interviewer. My name is Faith Ellis. The videographer is Jim Mills, and taking notes is Beth Finch. So welcome back.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. Last time was fun.
So we managed to get your reminiscences up to about age 17 on the first go-around, so we have quite a bit more room to cover. But we wanted to talk about some of the places here in town that either aren't here anymore or have changed a lot. So I know, for example, you remember the underpass on Underpass Road. Do you have any adventures related to that structure?
No, I never whacked into it like a lot of people did. I do, however, have a nice picture of it at home that I've given to a few people around town, Steve Eldridge being one of them, because he had, the business right there and stuff. But, I don't ever have any. We did used to ride on the railroad tracks, though.
Oh, so tell us about that.
Well, back in the days, we were driving around in 55 Chevys or 58 Chevys, and the wheelbase was such that it would fit. If you let air out of the tires would fit on the rails of the train tracks.
On the outside or the inside?
On the over it. It would overlap.
Nice.
The rails are only that wide
Right.
at the top part.
Right.
And so anyhow, it would bulge down over, and you could just drive. You didn't even have to hold on to the steering wheel. You just go right around the corners, nice and gentle.
Nice.
Yeah. My brother picked up a baby skunk one time, and put it in the back of my car. I wasn't there, but
and then rode around it
and
on
rode
the
around
train
till
tracks?
finally it sprayed.
Nice.
In the back of my car.
So also off of Underpass Road was Brodie's turkey farm.
It was.
So can you describe what happened there?
Yeah,
for
Buddy
people that aren't
Buddy
familiar with it?
Brodie had this big piece of property, and he got involved with a company that raised turkeys and chickens, and he raised turkeys for them, and it was a pretty big operation. And so he'd raise them up to a certain age, and then he had a whole processing plant there where they'd pluck them and process them to get ready to go to market for Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that stuff. And a lot of us kids went up there and worked. And it was an interesting place. It was all blood and guts, I'll tell you that. It was awful. It was awful, but it was a job, and it was at the holidays, and we were always looking for a little bit extra money, and so we all went up there and worked up there.
And he had a license. Do you remember his vanity plate?
I do not.
Buddy Brodie had a vanity plate that said Gobble.
Gobble. I didn't know that. Maybe I did, but I didn't remember it. Well, that would fit. Buddy Brodie was a nice guy. He was just a farmer, is what he was. And raised kids in town. He had children and whatnot. And it was a lot of fun working up there. It was a lot of fun.
Well, did you work there with any companions?
Oh,
For example,
yeah,
I know my brother worked there briefly.
Yeah, I worked there with my brother, who was a troublemaker up there, and Steve Eldridge from East Dennis. Do you know Steve Eldridge? Our friend Steve, and various other guys, Kurt and Wayne Adams. I went to high school with. It's just a high school thing, and we'd all go up there and work. There was plenty of stuff to be shoveled, and they'd let us drive the dump truck up to the dump, the old dump back in the days when you just drive it up there and dump it all out.
All the leavings?
All the leavings, all the, the innards and feathers, and it's amazing how many feathers are left over from a bunch of turkeys. You had wing feathers. One of the guys that worked up there was what was his first name? Hutchins. Buzz Hutchins' dad. I'll think of his first name. Anyhow, he was an alcoholic, and he was up there running the wing machine one day, and it sucked him right in. And Buddy Brodie happened to be right there and grabbed him by the seat of the pants and the shirt and hauled him back out again. and it black and blued his arms.
Wow.
Something terrible. What it was, these two machines, they were with the rubber tines on them with little slits in them, would run towards each other, and you'd put the wing or the leg or whatever you were doing there, and it would strip the feathers off, sucked him right in. Oh gosh.
Oh, those were the days.
Yeah, those were the days.
What other things did you do for jobs when you were in high school?
In high school, I worked over at Jerry's Dairy Freeze in Yarmouth. I got Jerry to basically taught him how to make fried clams and onion rings and all that sort of stuff. You know, I'd learned from my father, and I worked over there.
Where was it, on 28?
It was on 28, over by where the Aqua Circus was.
Yep.
Now it's Barry Clifford's museum, Pirate Museum.
Okay,
Yeah.
Captain Parker's area.
Captain Parker's area,
Okay.
exactly. Right there. It was a hangout, but it was also, you know, a popular place to people come and eat, families and stuff. It was the old Dairy Queen style building, you know. It was neat.
Did you ever have, or what adventures did you have around the target ship in Cape Cod Bay?
Oh, we went out there diving all the time.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that.
All right, well, even Gail and I started and ran a dive shop up in East Dennis. And even before that, we used to go scuba diving out there. You know, it was neat. There was lobsters to be had and just look around, but it was in pretty fair shape then. And then when we had the dive shop, we used to take students out there. You know, that was kind of thrilling for, you know, to be one of your open water dives on this old rusty old shipwreck, you know. It was kind of neat. And so we messed around there a lot. I remember climbing up on it when we were kids, you know, don't ever get climbing on the target ship. All right, you know, first thing we did, you know, I go climbing on the target ship. But I remember one of the Benson kids left his boat in there, and went in there when the tide was low, and they were climbing up all over the thing. And the tide came in, and they couldn't get their boat out, so it kind of spent a tide underwater.
Oh wow. So and can for those folks who aren't familiar with it, because it's no longer there, can you describe the target ship, how it came to be there, and how it was used?
The target ship, sure. It was the USS, or the SS Longstreet was its name, and from what I heard, it was one of the ships that they built, one of the Liberty ships, and upon launching, something happened to it. And they say it broke its back, or something happened. I don't know what it was, but they were also, at the time, they were in need of a target, because there was the Naval Air Station up in Weymouth. There were other air bases around that needed real and true practice. And these guys were, you know, it was after the war and this and that. And
like practice bombing from airplanes.
Practice bombing and machine gunning from airplanes. And, you know, it was the greatest at night in the summertime to go down there and watch them. You know, these guys were all on maneuvers, you know, bombing and shooting and stuff. We're like kids, so we're like, yahoo! But then I think something happened. I think some shoreline got shot up over in Wellfleet or Eastham, and I think they put an end to that. But they bombed it and everything else, and it was kind of neat. It was neat. They also lost airplanes out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Your brother and I went, and Steve took Jason and I out to what?
Jason's your son.
Jason's my son. Took the two of us out. He had found something. He didn't know what it was for sure. And he had snagged on and found out where an airplane was. So we went out and dove on this airplane.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of the ones that went down from the target ship days. But it had been hooked onto by draggers and pulled apart a little bit, you know. But it was all still there, the machine guns, and you know, got some good lobsters there.
Yeah. Well, there were graffiti and paintings on it too, right?
On the plane?
No, not on the plane. I'm sorry.
Oh, on the target ship.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because the only reason
I was never involved with any of that.
You
know, it was enough of a place to go and play without ruining
And what about, you said you have memories of fish weirs here in Brewster.
I do. Clint Eldridge and his brother Leon or Cleon or Clint was the principal. He had two fish weirs, an inshore and an offshore fish weir, out in the channel off of Robbins Hill, and he'd tend them with his dory, or tend them out of an old jalopy that he had that could go out on the beach, and he caught mackerel and whatever swam along, but it was mostly mackerel and other assorted fish that would swim in. I think your brother was the last one that had a weir on the flats, and I think that's principally what he set it up for, was to catch mackerel.
Did you ever go out there when they were working it?
Oh, sure. We'd go out there as a hoop. You couldn't go in there as a kid. It was loaded with crabs. When you got into the heart and stuff, and you couldn't go in there. We didn't go in there. And there was all kinds of skate, where they're like sharp tails, and you didn't go into the heart. That was just but anyhow, yeah, we played in them. We also fished along them too, because the bass and stuff they'd go along and they'd hit the leader and they'd follow the leader.
Yeah,
and so it was a good place to go bass fishing. We did a lot of bass fishing when we were kids. Me and Billy Dugan caught a lot of fish.
Just walking out, or would you take a boat
both,
out?
but he and I had a skiff. I remember something happened to the engine. We rowed out one time.
Yeah.
We could catch a lot of fish, dozens of them, and then sell them. They only had to be 16 inches back then, and the bay was alive with them. That was a lot of fun.
In the last interview, you told us about one incident where you met Sabin Lord, and I'm wondering if you have other stories about Sabin.
Yeah, yep. One of the neatest ones is, and I have a picture of him at home in this roll, and we had a Labor Day party down behind the woodshed, first ever, live music and the whole deal. I don't think it lasted 35 minutes, and Sabin showed up in the cruiser, in the old, I don't know, must have been a '69 Chevy or something like that, big old boat. And he showed up, and that was the end of that. But I got a picture of him in the cruiser with this really sour puss on, like, you kids gotta get out of here, But once again, go home. It wasn't, they just send you home. Unless you acted up, then you had it coming, Didn't pay to act up with the cops. No.
And that was back in the day when Peter Murphy owned the woodshed?
Yes.
And the beginning of that whole crowd?
Yes, it was the beginning of that. Peter, and he had a partner initially, can't remember his name. They split up, and he went and bought a bar up in Conway or something like that. Anyhow, yeah, that was the beginning of the woodshed. Oh my gosh, the woodshed. We used to go down there and hang around on Sunday afternoons and get loaded and listen to live music. It was a lot of fun. Nobody got hurt, thank God.
Right.
Nobody got hurt. Yeah, the woodshed. My mother worked down there when it was, oh gosh, I can't remember what the name of it was, but she worked there. It was a jazz.
When Jean Emerson played the piano there?
Yeah. Back in those days, she worked there as a waitress. Yeah.
Well, it's been a restaurant and bar for a very, very long time, since the Considines had it.
And it's been a good place for young people to meet and whatnot, as we know. Isn't that where Paul and Tony met?
Yes. It's quite a legacy in my family, but we'll continue interviewing you. So let's dial back a little bit, and so you went to DY. We ended there at the last interview, And after high school, what was your next phase?
I went in the service.
And were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was well, I got my draft notice, and a bunch of us all went up to the Navy station, the Navy base, and did our physical thing and got sworn in, and we were all going to go in the Navy. And for some reason, after I got home, I decided I was going to go in the Marine Corps, and I went over to the recruiter, because the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy. I went over to the Marine recruiter in Hyannis and just switched it, and I couldn't get any of my friends to go with me.
Go figure.
Yeah, I don't know why.
What year was this, Dana?
This was in 1966.
Okay.
1966. I went in December 1st of 66, which was kind of mean because 3 days later was my mother's birthday. But I kind of had no choice. I had to go in, you know.
So where was your basic training?
I went to basic training at Parris Island, the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Parris Island.
That's in Georgia?
That is in South Carolina.
Okay.
And
was it hot?
No, I was down there in December,
okay.
And it wasn't. Actually, it was, we had frosty ice on the puddles mornings and stuff like that. It was chilly, field jackets and all that. But I went to boot camp down there, and then I went to the deal I made with I didn't make a deal with him, but the recruiter, instead of going in for 2 years, I went in for 3, and he got me track vehicle school. So I went to track vehicle school in California, down in Oceanside, California.
And what's a track vehicle?
Tanks.
Okay.
Tanks. That's what I was kind of specialized in, was tanks. And then shortly thereafter, went to Vietnam. And when I got there weren't really, we had tanks over there, but not a lot of them. So there was no, they didn't need me in tanks. So I went to the headquarters battalion, military police company headquarters battalion of the 3rd Marine Division. And did a bunch of different stuff for them. I wasn't trained as a military policeman, so I didn't do the gates. The highway ran on both of the combat bases that we operated from. The highway ran right through them, and they take care of both ends of it. I couldn't do that, or didn't do that. But I did all kinds of other stuff, patrols and other stuff.
So you were 3 years there in Vietnam?
No. A Marines tour in Vietnam was 13 months.
Okay.
The Army did a year. We did 13 months. And after that, I still had a year and a half to go, or a little over a year to go. So I came back to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and was in 2nd Tanks down at Camp Lejeune, and was discharged from there.
And when you went back and forth, did they send you by boat or by plane? How did they transport you from Southeast Asia back and forth?
By plane.
By plane.
By plane. Oh man, when we got on the plane to leave Da Nang, and it was a continental flight, a lot of these chartered flights and stuff. We got on the plane, and some of these guys that come straight out of the bush. I mean, like the day before they were in the bush. And anyhow, none of us smelled good. And the stewardess going through the plane with this spray stuff. Don't take offense. And we're like, yeah, we know. We're not taking offense. We know. Anyhow, it was, 13 months. But it went quick. We were busy.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. And were you aware of the things that were happening here stateside with?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. Not to the degree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, nothing. The reality until it hits you in the face, and when you come home,
Mm-hmm.
you got hit in the face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was hard. I just, you know, you came home, you ended up taking off your uniform and, you know, thumbing without your uniform. Sometimes, depending on where you were going, you'd leave the uniform on. Oh my word. One time I was coming home from Camp Lejeune, and you'd go down to this certain spot on the base, and it was called the swoop circle, and you could get a ride home from there.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a ride as far as, I don't even remember where it was, somewhere in Connecticut, and got out at this huge interchange rest area, and there was a guy in the men's room. I had my uniform on. There's a guy in the men's room trying to pick me up. So I went, that's it, I'm out of here. I didn't make a scene, I just left.
Mm-hmm.
So I go out, I'm walking out, you know, starting to thumb. Car pulls up, I go open the door to get in, and as the door's closing, I look over, it's the same guy from the men's room. So I went up to the next rest area, and I just said, you can let me out right here. You know, so I got out. I got picked up by a group of people who were going to New Hampshire to start a new religion. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. To start a new religion. And I went, I don't know, another few.
Were they cool? Were they?
Oh, it was cool. It was cool. But at this point in time, I'm going, you know, I'm feigned sleep over here in the corner, you know. And then I got out and got picked up by 3 people that were loaded.
Oh Lord.
And then I got out from underneath of them, and I was down here in Bourne, and I was standing on the side of the road. I could hear this car coming over the hill, and it was going, you know, I mean, really fast.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I just stepped back up off the road, you know. The car went by me. It was a state cop.
Mm-hmm.
So he slammed on the brakes. I'm like, and then backed up just as fast as he was going forward. Again, he dropped me off, picked me up, and dropped me off at my door down at the Heron Run.
Wow.
Yeah. That was quite the trip. All that happened in one trip home. Thumbing.
Thumbing in the 60s.
Yep. Another time I got out right there on the Cross Bronx Expressway, and some guy's car broke down or something, and I was in it, and I had thumbed, and I had just got out, and somebody was stopped to pick me up, and a little mail truck banged into him, and I'm like the cause of this, and I'm like, and then some guy in a Mustang pulls up, and he goes, you better get in here with me. So I come booking down the street and got out of there. He goes, you didn't want to be hanging around there.
Oh
Anyhow,
my gosh.
That was another thumbing home in the service incident.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, you come home for a weekend. It wasn't as if I was coming home for a week or something.
Right.
You know, and then you'd go up there, up in the Mass Pike. There was an interchange up there in Woburn or in Newton or something. And you'd go up there and you could get a ride back to the base.
Uh-huh.
Most of the times it was direct to up there and back and forth.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'd find somebody going to the Cape.
Yeah.
Or close.
Mm-hmm.
I had my own car for a while down there.
So, what year were you discharged?
I was discharged in 1969.
And were you and Gail married at that point?
No.
Or?
No. Gail and I had gone together prior to that, and I went in the service. I mean, I had no choice. I had been drafted, you know, so I needed to do something. And she went back to Canada, became a stewardess, and then when I came home, we got back together again and started going out again. Yeah. Yeah. She had a really unfortunate incident happened. She was engaged to some guy who died in a shipping accident. The ship disappeared up off Alaska. Faith I can't remember the name of the ship, but that was terrible. That was terrible.
But she was you said in the earlier interview, she was a summer kid, and that's how you originally met and came to know each other.
Yep, we knew each other as kids. Didn't do stuff together really. We hung around together down in there's a huge old tree down by where Kate's is now, and we all used to go down and hang around down there. You know,
the gathering spot for the West Brewster kids.
Yeah, I'm sure East Brewster had a gathering spot too.
We did.
I'm sure you did. You know, but it was anyhow. So I knew her since then, and then she and her friend Ivy, when they were, I don't know, 17 or 18, came down and lived at Neil's and were the chambermaids for the summer.
At Neil Nevin's
At
cottages.
Neil Nevin's hotel and cottages there. They were the chambermaids. And Gail and I went out that summer. They were staying in cabin 13 down at the Jolly Whaler. We had a lot of fun. Rinky Clark. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Rinky worked there with part-time for Neil.
Rinky was part of that whole neighborhood crowd too.
Oh yeah, he was. Rinky and Johnny and Butchie and
Butchie Cash, right?
Butchie Cash, yep.
Johnny
Livesey.
Okay.
Johnny Livesey. Rinky Clark. Harold Clark was his name.
I was going to ask you what.
That was his name. Was Harold. And Joe Tabor. I don't know, Walter Story.
Yep.
I mean, it was quite a crowd of that age. They called themselves the West Brewster Ruggies.
Ruggies.
As in rugged.
Okay.
And they were mean as a son of a gun to us younger guys.
Oh my gosh.
Terrible snowball fights and one-sided snowball fights and acorn blitzes. Those things will leave a welt on you when you get hit in the head.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah. It was bad.
Where did you learn how to dive? Or scuba dive? Because you're a fully
licensed instructor and all of that. There was a couple of guys, the Ruckers, Jay and Jeff Rucker, and they stayed in the house where Jerry Berry. You know where Jerry Berry's house was? You know, in Maniac, where Betty Maniac lives now, at the corner of Paynes Creek and Stoney Brook. You go from the mill, you're headed east, you go over the hill, and you take a left onto Paynes Creek.
Yeah.
That house right there on the right.
Oh, yes. Yes.
They stayed in there. They were relatives.
Okay.
And I knew them when they were kids there. Well, anyhow, in '65, one of them had gone in the service, got drafted and was going in the service. They had both gone and learned how to scuba dive. So one of the guys was gone. He goes, "Come on up the pond. I'll show you. Don't take a few minutes, you know." I'm like, "All right, I'll do it," you know. So we went up to Sheep's Pond and got the whole idea of water in the mask and take the thing in and out and don't panic and the whole weight scenario and everything. So then we went out to and dove. We used to be able to park right by the beach by Tautog Rock, and in Dennis.
Okay. Off of what Dennis Beach?
It's right next to the jetties. It's just off of the big jetty where you go into Sassuat.
For Sassuat, okay.
For Sassuat. It's off to the westward up that way.
Okay.
Anyhow, we went diving up there in the salt water. And we had gone out. We'd gotten a bunch of lobsters, a bag of lobsters. Each of us did. And we were coming back in, and I ran out of air. So I pulled the J valve thing and kept swimming and going and ran out of air. So then I went to the surface, and I was fairly close to the beach, you know, maybe 50 yards or so.
Yeah.
75 yards. and I was trying to tread water, and the weight belt slipped down by my hips, and at that very time, my tippy toes came onto a rock.
Oh my goodness.
A boulder.
Yeah.
And I was able to regain my composure and get things squared away and make it to the beach. Like an idiot, I just should have dropped the lobsters or my weight belt,
Right.
or the weight belt. I don't think we had vests. I don't believe we had any inflatable safety vests, you know. And then when I came home from the service, my friend Duke, who I believe you know, Swanson,
Yes.
and he had been a UDT SEAL, and he and I,
What does UDT stand for?
underwater demolition team,
Okay.
and then Navy SEAL.
Okay.
He was both.
Okay. I'm sure that sounds exciting.
It was. And he and I both bought scuba gear and started diving down off of Provincetown, getting lobsters and, you know, just doing all kinds of diving. And then our friend Jim Mellon gave up the dive shop business in Chatham, and Gail and I talked it over, and I went and got certified, and then we opened up the Shipmate Dive Shop, and we ran that for, I think, 3 summers. It was just a lot of work.
Yeah.
It was very little time, you know, but it did afford us all the money that we get for filling the air tanks. We got it in cash usually. We stashed that away, and we'd go down to St. Croix in the wintertime and visit with friends. And then we moved down there for 3 years.
And you
And
had a
we
really
sold the dive shop.
You had a big job there. Explain what you were doing in St. Croix for diving.
At the time, there was an oil refinery. There was actually 2 oil refineries and a petrochemical refinery at Hess Oil. And at the time, it was the largest refinery in the world, refinery complex in the world. And he had his own fleet of super tankers, ships, that transported all of this oil and so forth. And we were repairing these huge man-made piers of boulders and so forth that the ships would tie up against. They'd put these dolphins, they called them dolphins, out where big pilings, that's what they were. But I got a job where we would tie these huge 12-foot long by 4-foot wide by optimum 18 to 2 foot deep plastic bags, and we'd fill them full of concrete underwater. We were pumping concrete underwater. And that was a very intense, it was 6 days a week too. I burned myself out doing it, you know. Plus it was 6 days, and you know, I wasn't seeing the kids.
Right. So
you know, it was a lot.
So you and Gail, while you were in St. Croix, Jason was there, and
Jason, when we moved to St. Croix, Jason went with us. He was, I think, like 3.5 years old, 4.5 years old, and we moved to St. Croix. And while we lived there, we adopted a Korean child. I think I told you we talked about it in the last interview, I think, that we had looked around at different places to try to find a child to adopt from Vietnam, from St. Croix, and it just didn't work out. So we had friends and looked into, we had friends who had, excuse me, Korean children, and we looked into that and adopted Lonnie, who I talk with today.
Oh, good.
We talk a lot.
Good.
We talk a lot.
So talk about, you came back to Brewster, I'm assuming when the kids were school age, or?
When the kids were school age, yep. Jason was due to go to first grade or actually I think he had gone to first grade down there. When we came home, we kept him back to first grade again here. It just, you know, he needed to stay back. So anyhow, and Lonnie needed help. She went over to the tech school. They had a program to help her. You know, she's just learning to speak. You know, you could come from one day of everybody speaking Korean to somebody speaking a different language. We lived in St. Croix, and there was when Gail carried her down the street in St. Croix, they walked past a shop and there was a parrot that spoke. So there's poor Lonnie, you know, different language, the birds talk, you know. She was pretty confused for a while. But she's a wonderful kid who's doing well for herself.
Well,
she works real hard.
Yeah. Real hard.
Both my kids do. I'm very fortunate. I have two really wonderful kids. Wonderful kids.
What do they do?
Excuse me?
What do they do?
What do they do?
Yeah.
Jason, who lives here in Brewster, works for National Grid on the street gas side of National Grid. He just recently became a welder for the company. He's a go-getter. He doesn't, you know, and he got tired of, you know, the way a lot of kids young people nowadays just don't want to work, and he got tired of being the guy trying to work with them. So he went out, and this is more of you're doing this on your own thing, you know. So he's doing very well. They have a son, with my daughter-in-law Melissa. They have one son, Cody, who's just turned 5 in May, and he's a good little boy, great little boy. I'm very fortunate. He's the only grandchild that we have, and right now I think the way that things are, it'd be the only one that we have. And
so tell us what Lonnie's doing in California.
Lonnie lives in California and has for a number of years. She has 3 different businesses out there. 2 of them are involved in people in need of coming out of a hospital or coming into a situation and being in need of being placed into a facility or a home where they can get the help that they need and so forth. 2 of the businesses are involved in that. The other one, she just purchased a 53-bed nursing home, which I think she's in. Well, it's an old facility, and she's having a hard time with the authorities in the city. You know, I don't know what their thoughts and plans are, and
the oversight of it and the legal part
of
it. The
legal part of it, because once you change ownership, all the licenses and all of that need to be in her name, and which involves going to all these different boards and whatnot. So anyhow, the city's just been giving her a hard time, and unfortunately, her idea was to take this place and, as she's fixing it up, also give better care. You know, she wrote what do you call it when you plan of
a business plan?
A business plan, or you know, a plan of attack of how she wanted to go about this, and you know, spending money on all of the stuff that these people were bugging her about wasn't it. She wanted to upgrade the facility, and you know, she had a plan. She had a business plan, and these people have just gotten right in the middle of it. But she's persevering.
Yeah,
she's persevering.
She's a hard worker.
She worked at the woodshed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'd really like to talk to you about, because it's something that I know you've been very involved with, and that is your civic and volunteer work here in Brewster on a lot of boards, and in particular on the Alewife and Mill Sites Committee.
Yeah.
But before, because I know you have a lot to say about that, you were on the planning board for a while, were you not?
I was.
Tell me when you were on it and what sort of things you worked on as a planning board member.
Oh gosh, when it was in the 80s.
Okay.
And I was on it. Steve Eldridge was the chairman. We had other various members, of many of which came and went. I was on it. It was an elected position, I believe, for 5 years. After I got on, I realized, holy smoke, some of these guys only get on for 3 years. What am I doing here? Anyhow, I persevered. And we worked on a lot of different subdivisions and stuff that were going on in town. I was sort of sorely disappointed when I first got on the board, and that was that Steve Eldridge handed me a stack of, state rules and regulations and laws and this and that. And, I just came to realize that, a lot of the things you think you can accomplish and you've seen change in town, you want to remain the same and whatnot, dictated, rules and regulations are dictated by other people. And, but anyhow, we did accomplish a lot. We think we did. Not everyone agrees, but we got the 5-acre dirt road bylaw passed. That was we thought was a good deal for the town and people with acreage.
So to explain what that is, because I'm not familiar with it.
There are a lot of, not a lot, there are dirt roads in town, and they're just unimproved dirt roads. And people wanted to and were building homes off of these. And somewhere along the line, the town said, we couldn't provide these people with services and everything. So we enacted, or we got together and came up with a law that said you had to have, after so many feet of a dirt road or a cartway or however it was labeled, you had to have 5 acres of land before you could carve off a piece and build a home.
Okay.
So you had to have acreage. And at the same time, I think we changed it to be 2.5 acres on the local side of the zoning, and we made good changes, I think. We worked on some good projects.
And that was a time when zoning was a relatively new endeavor for the town.
Well, not necessarily so. There was zoning. I remember Jack Nevins and Rolly Bassett and those guys getting together and putting together some sort of a planning board, or it was the start of, I don't think their whole ideas and everything might have gone well, but it was a start, There's always been involvement in people in town, that's one of the greatest things about town. It just is. There's been a lot of good involvement.
So talk about the Alewife Committee.
The Alewife Committee.
Or the Alewives.
The Alewives Committee. The Alewife Committee, well, I got involved in the Alewife Committee at a real early age. My dad was on the Alewife Committee along with Ernie Gage and Ivan Dugan. And they'd go down there and shovel out, the sand and dirt and stuff out of the brook, and all of us kids had hip boots, and it was the greatest thing in the world to go down there and help them out, So I started helping down there at a pretty early age, and I just remember the place. I remember, there haven't been that many changes, honestly. In the time that we've been involved down there, all of us, Faith, we haven't really made many changes. Not really. Some, but.
And you have had a lot of involvement with the state.
I have over the years. Before we had, the Natural Resources Department, who the Alewife Committee falls under now. Before we had the Natural Resources, it was up to me or whoever was the chairman or whoever had involvement to get a hold of the state when we had problems or when things needed to change or when we needed to rewrite rules and regulations. So I did have a good involvement with the state, with Buzzy, and most of it was with the guys, the field guys, the, you know, Buzz DiCarlo. I remember having a lot, you know, of stuff done with his help down there. The ladder, so the ladder ways on the north side of the stream there, the first 4 of them have floors in them and stuff, and they got rebuilt. The ladders themselves got rebuilt. You know, he helped us with that.
How does the Brewster Run rank in terms of Eastern Massachusetts, or all, you know?
Well, there are. We have a good, healthy run. There are a lot of other, not a lot. There are a few other places around that have more herring than we do, but they're different systems also. You know.
For example, are you thinking Middleborough?
Middleborough, exactly, Faith, exactly.
Okay.
Middleborough comes to mind.
But on the Cape, this is...
Yeah, Mashpee has a run. A lot of these towns have runs, but they're just not runs like our run. You know, our run is accessible, and that's what makes our run so neat. You know, there's so many people get to enjoy it. I mean, it's, you know, there's a place to park most of the time, and it's just good things go on down there. And,
yep. So now talk about your stewardship of the Grist Mill.
Stewardship of the Grist Mill.
And the whole, we've talked a little bit about the whole area, but you've been really passionate about that building and that area.
Well, you know, I grew up right there, as we all know, and you know, I had my life to study the place, so to speak, and some of that was in playing with it. You know, the brook was ours, and any time of the year we wanted, we'd shut it off and see what was in it, and so I learned a lot about the place and how it works, and you know, and I just, after my time in the service, I just realized that I felt an obligation to volunteer, to be involved. And knowing, you know, as much about the place as I did, and how much I liked the place, and also when I came home, there was a group of people that, there were fish in the brook. The brook was full of fish. And up at the pond, where the last ladderway for the fish to get into the pond, there was so much water that the fish could not swim into the pond. They were stuck in the stream. And this was on the other side, to open it up and start to drain some of the water out of there, was locked. So I went and got a pair of bolt cutters. I couldn't find anyone on the committee to come down and, hey, we got to do something.
Right.
So anyhow, I couldn't find anybody. I went down with a pair of bolt cutters and started to adjust the water. And the people in the committee found me. You know, who the hell do you think you are going down there and cutting? I said, hey guys, you weren't paying attention down there to what was going on. So when I explained it, they understood it. But anyhow, so then I'm just like, if nobody knows what's going on here, you know, then I should be involved. And Gail and I had just built a house just up a quarter of a mile up the street, which I feel very fortunate to live that close to where I grew up. You must kind of feel the same, you know. Not many people can say that. Anyhow, so I, you know, realized that it's, you know, the place needed some help, and the more I realized, you know, the more, and the brook needed help. All of the bridges were falling in. The place was in terrible shape. The previous committee had spent a good fair amount of money on a drawn plans to plant the place, not fix anything.
Mhm.
They were going to plant stuff.
Mhm.
So anyhow, we went, and I got Charlie Sumner was showing up about the same time. There were a group of other people that I knew and friends and whatnot, and we just started working down there. You know, fixing stone walls that were falling in. Andy Schrake was instrumental in fixing bridges.
Yeah.
Um,
You volunteers under your direction put in the walkways.
yes, we did. We put in walkways, new brick walkways that will help out as far as accessibility. They're a nice, flat, tight surface. I don't know that. Yeah, it's just that's the kind of stuff that we've done. We built nice walls down there. We widened one of the pathways so you know a wheelchair could pass by some stones, some boulders that we did not want to chip or move. So you know, there's always projects.
Yeah, and you. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Faith.
You worked as a miller there for a while as well.
I did. Jason did. Gail did. We all did. And then there was a period in time when the place had been, you know, going. When I took over, it was a bunch of older folks down there. Jim White and Roy White, and gosh, I can't even remember who else. But they weren't getting things done. You know what I mean? And I saw where someone else had been the chairman, and they'd looked into repairing the dam where the sluice comes out of to run the wheel. And they had talked about it in meetings and this and that. Went on for years. They never did anything about it. So we just went down there and we ripped the dam apart, you know, and pour a new reinforced concrete pad, and then faced it with stone. You know, I hate to use concrete, but concrete's been used in that manner all over forever. So, and it looks good and it's worked well. So, you know, we started fixing stuff. And then the mill building has been, you know, a lot done to the building itself to preserve the roof inside, upstairs in the museum. So you retain the look and the smell of the old salt boards and stuff. And I think we've done some, you know, good things for the mill. I think we've done some fun things for the mill. And the people that have been involved and have helped along the way have been, you know, that have been instrumental in all of this happening, you being one of them, Faith. You know, I think that, you know, the town, you know, is and should be proud of what we've done down there. We've done a lot, and it's been fun, a lot of fun.
Or how about influential people in your life beyond people you've already talked about?
Yeah, influential people in my life. Well, my mother and father, first and foremost, they were living life, you know, in kind of a hard way when they moved down here into that old house. We talked about that. That was tough sledding for a while, and you know, but they persevered. Bill Carr, my mother and father's friend, Bill Carr. I was at a young age, you know, 8 or 10 years old. I was following him around on his trap line and stuff, and I eventually had my own trap line. And then, you know, learning bass fishing. He always had a bass boat, and he'd come and get me and take me bass fishing when I was a kid. And then Bill and Walter from Brewster were wonderful people.
What were their first and last names?
Walter Hyde and Bill Arbuckle.
Okay.
Bill Arbuckle owned, and Walter owned Brewster. And they were just, you know, wonderful people in our lives, in our young lives, for looking after us and babysitting and getting together. And you know, it was a nice neighborhood. that we lived in, and nice people, and we did stuff.
Mhm.
You know, we did stuff. When I was a kid, one of the first jobs I had was caddying down at the Brewster golf course for the Smiths.
Yeah.
Um,
And we did talk a little bit about that. What about, I was thinking more of your chimney work.
Chimney work, yeah. Well, I was always involved in concrete. I worked at Cape Cod Ready Mix, and I ran their concrete pump trucks and so forth. And then I had my own concrete pump trucks, and I also started a chimney lining business, relining business. And it was hard, dirty work, but I made a good living doing it. I did a lot of that work over on Nantucket.
Mm-hmm.
I traveled over there, and I found a good deal on a really nice house to stay in. I think you were over there
Mm-hmm.
once.
Mm-hmm.
A really nice house to stay in, and I worked. I went over there and worked. I go over there sometimes a week or almost 10 days at a time. Just stay over there and work.
And was it primarily historic homes, or was it?
It was historic homes.
Yeah.
It was primarily historic homes, and a lot of these places were, they're still full of furniture and everything else. You had to go in there and completely, tarp the place in plastic and tarps, and build rooms and plastic rooms
Mm-hmm.
inside of rooms. And
Did you find little hidden corners?
oh,
and
you always
chimneys?
did. You always did. You find old chewed off TD pipes and
What's a TD pipe?
the old pipes that they'd have to have in these inns with the bowl made out of clay,
Mm-hmm.
and then a long stem, so you could use them, and then you just bust off or chew off the stem, and you'd have a fresh pipe. So so you'd find, and then when it got down to the end, you just
Yeah.
out
Okay.
the pipe went.
The old clay pipes.
The old clay pipes.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of them said TD on them, and I think that was a manufacturer. I think they're made in England, I think. But anyhow, you'd find them, and for some reason or another, people would throw from up in the attic their old leather shoes and belts and leather stuff down the chimney, beside the chimney.
Really?
Really, go figure. I mean,
Just down
down the chase between the lath wall,
Yeah.
and you go up in the attic and you look down, you see the lath walls, and here's the chimney, and people would throw shoes and boots and
Isn't that interesting?
down there. I don't know why, because leather never goes away either.
Right. Right.
You know.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well, I remember just briefly, Stan Godwin, of course, lived in that old house, the Packet antique house, and as a little boy, there was a tiny spot beside the chimney where he had a little chair. He's the only one in his family who could get in there, but he used to go and sit on his little boy chair beside the chimney in his private little alcove.
Yeah.
So I always have this picture of these old, I love old cubby holes, just that
Chimneys
people
had 'em.
use, you have no idea how, but yeah.
Chimneys had them, and most of them were accessible underneath the stairway. I've shown several people, I've gone out to look to see if we could restore their chimneys or whatever, and shown the people, found the door, and they'd be amazed at how much room. You think about, back-to-back fireplaces, downstairs and upstairs, and what kind of a base it must take to.
Sure.
There was always, and a lot of times there was an arch in between them. So there was always, not always, but very often, a place to hide, a hidey hole. Which is neat. It was neat. But it was, oh my God, hard, dirty work is what it was. The chimney work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd have to source antique bricks, or?
After a while, I would tear down enough old chimneys and stuff. I'd save bricks, and
Okay.
I had quite a supply of old stuff, which was kind of cool. I really enjoyed that part of it, and using different, not just out of the bag mortars, and just fixing up stuff. But it was fun. It was fun. Just another part of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that. And I've driven all kinds of trucks. Had the concrete pump business.
And traveled the world.
Well, I haven't traveled the world. I really haven't had a desire to go to Europe. I could go to certain parts of Asia. But we have traveled. We went to Ireland. Gail was born in Ireland. And we visited there for a good 3 weeks. Almost circumnavigated the island. It's one thing we figured out kind of early on. If you're going to spend the money on airfare and so forth to get someplace, make being there worthwhile.
Yeah.
Stay there for a while.
Yeah.
You know, so we, you know, it's usually 2 or 3 weeks, you know, at least when we've traveled. And we've traveled a lot through the Caribbean. We lived in St. Croix. We traveled when we lived there. We had friends and we sailed to a lot of the British Virgin Islands. And then I was fortunate enough to have an aunt and an uncle that had a sailboat, and they sailed from the Great Lakes down through the Erie Canal to South America and back. And Gail and I hitched on with them in St. Martin and sailed to Saba and Statia, St. Kitts, and Antigua. And that was on their way down south. And then on their way back up, we met them in Grenada. They said they found the most beautiful place that we could share with them on the way back. They found it on the way down. And so we met them in Grenada and sailed north up into the Grenadines. And we told them when we first went aboard that we have no ticket home. We're just going to get off somewhere, and we'll find our way home from there. So when we got into the harbor, Port Elizabeth on the island of Bequia, we jumped ship and we spent a couple of days there and then went home. And then we ended up going back to Bequia, and ended up going back to Bequia and taking some of my family and then a lot of our friends. So, and Faith and Peter being two of them. We've really had a great time visiting these islands. And Gail and I have, you know, become familiar with a lot of them. But we've had the most fun with our friends in just visiting and, you know, and spending the time on those islands. You know, good beach days, good dinners out, good sails down to the Tobago Keys, just, you know, snorkeling, diving. I tried to dive down there almost every day, scuba dive, almost every day. But we had a lot of fun. Brewster has changed, and it's changed just in the number of people that live here. You know, I grew up there down at the Heron Run, and I'm fortunate enough to live just up the street. But so many houses on Stoney Brook Road are new, you know, going both ways from the mill. And it's just, and the size of the developments, you know, Ocean Edge, and, you know, what's happened to Brewster in that respect. But I will say that, you know, we don't have any huge shopping plazas in town, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Every town around us has one. We can shop there. I just don't think we need it. I think Brewster has done fairly well at preserving, we've done better than fairly well at preserving land. I was fortunate enough to be on the Open Space Committee at its beginning, and we had the opportunity to buy some really inexpensive, pretty large pieces of property. The Rowley property. There, you know, we did well. We looked around, and they're still buying land, property. And thank goodness for the Conservation Trust. They bought a lot of land. So it's all that we can put aside in Brewster is a good thing for town. You know, we don't need to have shopping plazas and all of that stuff. I'm kind of shocked at what's going on down in East Brewster right now at the Cumberland Farms. It's just like, my God. But whatever, it's what's going on. But all in all, though, when you look around town, and I drive around, and especially this spring, it's been, for some reason, you know, the flowers seem to be bigger and brighter and more of them. And I drive around these roads and just admire the country roads that we live on. We live in a beautiful place, a beautiful place. And, you know, do we all take advantage of it enough? I don't know, sometimes not, but we live in a beautiful place. And we live in a place where people care, you know? So, has it changed? Oh yeah, but it's changed everywhere.
Right.
Change is inevitable. You know, I realize that on the planning board. Change is inevitable. You know, you can't stop it. You just kind of sometimes got to shape it. And sometimes that doesn't work.